Hey folks, I'm back at my favorite place, the salvage yard. I want to improve the handling of my newly purchased Toyota Prius, but unfortunately there isn't much aftermarket for those cars. So I decided this will be my aftermarket. Let's go shopping. Hey folks, I recently bought a Prius to use as my daily driver. So far my only complaint is about the handling, or rather the lack thereof. So I decided to do something about it. I searched the internet looking for suspension upgrades but didn't find much of anything. However, I did find an old thread in the Prius chat forum where someone installed sway bars from a Toyota Corolla. That piqued my interest, so I did some more research. According to my research, the 9th generation Corolla suspension is very similar to the 2nd generation Prius. Here in the US, that would be the 2003 to 2008 Corolla. Also, the Toyota Matrix and Pontiac Vibe are based on the same chassis as the Corolla, so theoretically, sway bars from any of those cars should work. Armed with that information and a bag of tools, I headed out to the salvage yard. Okay, we're in luck. I found 4 cars that all should be suitable donors for sway bars. We have this wrecked Corolla right here, a couple Matrixes, and then on the end another Corolla, all in the same model year that we're looking for. So between these 4 cars I should be able to find a pair of good sway bars. This Corolla has crash damage, but the rear sway bar appears to be intact. So I'm gonna take that. Unfortunately, I didn't bring a tripod, so I'm gonna have to shut off the camera. Here's one of the sway bar bolts. These guys are really tight. I wish I brought a breaker bar, because I really had to fight with that. By the way, it's a 19 millimeter. The bolt on the other side was just as difficult, but at least it's easy to get to. That's the nut right there. And then underneath, that's the head of the bolt. Pretty simple. Alright, here we have the rear sway bar out of the car. These are the 2 mounting bolts right here. They go through the ends of the sway bar just like that. Alright, now let's look for a front sway bar. Well, somebody made my life easier. We have 2 vehicles here with the front suspension just laying on the ground. I took a look at this one. This is actually the Corolla that I just got the rear sway bar from. That front sway bar appears to be bent right there, so I'm not going to risk it. This is a Matrix, but the sway bar appears to be the same, and this one doesn't look bent, so I think I'm going to take that one. The sway bar attaches to the chassis with 2 10mm bolts on this side and 2 more on that side right there. And the end links attached to the sway bar with 17mm nuts. Alright, time to put the camera down again. Oh, by the way, I said these are 10mm, they're actually 12mm. My bad. Alright, here we have our 2 sway bars from the junkyard. I got the mounting hardware, and I also got the bushings for the front sway bar. This sway bar is bigger diameter than the Prius one, so I'm guessing the Prius bushings probably won't fit it. So I'll take these just in case. Alright, let's install those sway bars on the Prius. I didn't feel like removing the rear wheels, so I put the car up on ramps. Okay, so just like we saw in the salvage yard, the rear sway bar is attached with 2 bolts, one on each end. The mounting bolt comes up from the bottom, and it has a nut on the top, just like this. Actually, this came from the sway bar from the Corolla. Now, just a word of warning, this nut is going to be super tight. I actually needed a breaker bar to get it loose. But anyway, once you remove those 2 bolts, the sway bar should come right out. Oh, I almost forgot. The bolt and the nut both take a 19mm wrench. Okay, since we have the 2 sway bars here, we might as well compare them. This one is the sway bar I just took out of the Prius, and this is the one I got from the junkyard from the Corolla. The Corolla sway bar is supposed to be larger diameter than the Prius one, so let's measure that and find out. Alright, the Prius sway bar is about 19mm. The Corolla sway bar is about 20mm. That's only 1mm diameter difference. However, another thing to keep in mind is the Prius sway bar is hollow. You can tell it's really lightweight. Whereas the Corolla sway bar is solid. You can even hear it. It sounds more solid. It's also significantly heavier, so this sway bar is going to be significantly stronger than this one. And actually, that's reflected in the mounting hardware. If you look at the mounting bolts for the Corolla sway bar, they look beefier than the ones for the Prius sway bar. Now, I tested these, and the nuts are interchangeable, so the threads are actually the same size, and the bolts are the same diameter. However, these bolts have been beefed up so they can handle a stiffer sway bar. So when I install this sway bar, I'm going to use these bolts. Alright, the rear sway bar is installed. As a side note, the torque for the 2 mounting bolts and the 2 ends is pretty high. Unfortunately, my Bentley manual does not give a torque spec for the rear sway bar, so I had to look for it online. And the answers I got ranged anywhere from 144 foot-pounds to 180 foot-pounds. I decided to go with 150 foot-pounds because that's a nice even number. If I need to tighten it up some more, I'll do that in the future, but for now, that's what we're going to run with. Now that the rear sway bar is installed, it's time to move on to the front. Okay, moving on to the front. I decided to jack up the front of the car and put it on jack stands. That way I can remove the wheels and I'll have some more room to work on the sway bar. As a matter of fact, this is the sway bar right here. This is the end link. It connects to the strut. The first thing I'm going to do actually is remove the end link from here and from the end of the sway bar. These are both 17mm nuts. Okay, the end links are being difficult, but thankfully they have a hole in the center here. This thing wants to turn, by the way. They have a hole in the center so you can insert a 6mm Allen wrench and hold this thing so it doesn't spin while you undo the nut. Alright, the nuts are out. Now, out with you. Man, that thing looks trashed. That might be part of the reason my car is making squeaky, squawky noises. And of course, I'll do the same for the other side, but I won't make you sit here and watch it. We'll get it done off camera. By the way, here are the old end links. They're looking pretty worse for wear. Check that out. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty toasty. This one makes nice ushy gushy sounds. Yeah. Thankfully, I bought some new ones, so that's cool. Anyway, let's finish removing that sway bar. Okay, next step is to detach the front sway bar from the chassis. This is going to be tough to get a camera angle because it's so tight in here. But you can see one of the mounting bolts right here. And there's another one on the other side of the bar back here somewhere that you can't see. But these both need to come out on this side and on the other side of the car. These bolts are all 12 millimeter, by the way. Man, these sway bar bolts are in a tight spot. To get at the ones on the back side of the sway bar, I actually had to reach in from the underneath the center of the car with an open-end wrench. Here's the sway bar, and here is the head of the wrench I'm talking about. Let me show you another view. This is really tough to get on camera. Okay, so here's another viewing angle from underneath the car. I've got the wrench set up on the bolt right now. You can see the sway bar going across here. This is the wrench, of course, and you can just barely see right there. That is the bolt we're trying to get out. So, yeah, lots of fun. Okay, so that one bolt is out. While we're under here, we might as well get the sway bar bolt on the other side, which is right about there. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Right there. Alright, the mounting bolts are out. I also removed the brackets because they'll probably just hang up on stuff when I remove the sway bar anyway. Speaking of the sway bar, it is now ready to come out. It's just sitting here loose. Looks like I'll be able to pull it out through the fender. Plot twist. I was originally going to pull the sway bar out through the wheel well, but unfortunately that didn't work out. In order to make room for the sway bar to come out, I need to detach the exhaust and move it out of the way. I also need to detach the steering column and move that out of the way. When I went to remove the exhaust, these bolts didn't want to come out. Now, I didn't want to push my luck because I don't want to deal with broken exhaust bolts, so I had to find another solution. That solution was to drop the cross member so I can move it out of the way, and then I can slide the sway bar out the back, which is what I did. Unfortunately, that's going to affect the wheel alignment, so after I get this all done, I have to have the alignment checked. But hey, that's better than dealing with broken exhaust bolts. Anyway, before I install that Corolla sway bar, let's take a look at it. Okay, here we have the two sway bars. This one is the Prius sway bar, and this one is the Corolla sway bar. Sorry about the background noise. Apparently the birds are having a party or something. Anyway, let's measure these. Okay, so the Prius sway bar is a little over 21 millimeter. The Corolla sway bar is 24 millimeter. Not bad. Anyway, let's get this guy installed in the car. Here's a quick piece of advice if you need to reinstall the subframe like I did. Look at where the bolts attach to the subframe. The bolts will actually leave witness marks on the subframe. You can actually see that right here, right there. When you tighten up the bolt, make sure that the bolt head lines up with those witness marks, just like that. And that'll help make sure that the subframe is lined up correctly. Alright, the sway bar is installed and the subframe is reinstalled as well. Unfortunately, the Bentley manual has let me down once again. It does not have torque specs for the sway bar mounting bolts. It also does not have torque specs for the subframe bolts either. So I had to look those up online. Actually, I found a copy of the Toyota service manual online. I'm going to put that in my Google Drive, and I'm going to put a link in the description. Anyway, all we have left to do now is reinstall the end links. Now the nuts on the end links have a torque spec of 55 foot-pounds. Alright, everything is installed and torqued to factory spec. Just a note on the end links. Pay close attention to how they're installed. The top part of the end link faces the inside of the car, and the bottom part of the end link faces the outside of the car. If you get the end links backwards, first of all, it'll be at a weird angle. Second of all, if this end of the end link is inside instead of outside, it'll hit the control arm. Just FYI. Also, before we wrap this up, I noticed a little something about my front suspension. Hear that noise? I can hear that noise when I drive the car, and it's pretty annoying. Can you say future video? Yeah. Anyway, all we have left to do is reinstall the wheels, and this is done. Torque spec on the lug nuts is 76 foot-pounds. Sorry guys, I'm still trying to figure out the talking while driving thing. So we're going to do a voiceover. Anyway, it's been a couple days since I installed the new sway bars. I took some time to get familiar with the car's new handling characteristics. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the stock Prius suspension. To put it bluntly, it's terrible. The car had lots of body roll and it had massive understeer. The front end plowed so much I thought I was on a farm. Thankfully, the Corolla sway bars fixed both of those issues. First of all, the stiffer sway bars reduce the body roll. Plus, the handling is more balanced, so the massive understeer is gone. Now it handles more like a normal car. But just to be clear, you shouldn't expect this to turn your Prius into a sports car. After all, these are stock sway bars from a Toyota Corolla. But this is a noticeable improvement. I would highly recommend it. Anyway, I think this is a good place to end the video. There's more suspension work to be done on the Prius, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.